So that's basically a walk around of the tanks that my wife and I have in the house right now. I've got Hey YouTube, today with a little bit of an around the world on my fish tanks, because I know there's some people that are new to my channel. Thanks to Corey and Jim, I seem to have had an influx of new people, so I just figured I'd do a little roundup and cover all the tanks my wife and I have. This is my 110-gallon tank. It is an old 30-something-year-old Oceanic, and 110 is much taller than it is wide, which gives it a smaller surface area at the top. But I am using this tank as a L260 grow out and breeding setup. If you have a good eye, you can spot one right there in that cave in the center of the. She's hanging out right out of the cave. I've also got some Teleocycla monogrammas in here. This is basically my Rio Tapajos-like setup. It's not exactly that, because the Teleocycla monogrammas come from the Xingu instead of the Tapajos. And I've also got, well, actually 8 pencil fish in here. This morning I noticed one stuck on the wave maker, so I lost a pencil fish overnight. And it's basically a setup that mimics Tapajos River type setup. So I've got fish in here that that could potentially be in a setup like the Rio Tapajos is in the rapid areas. It requires a lot of heavy flow. It requires a lot of oxygenation. You might be able to see that I have my Fluval 404 canister output shooting straight across the top of the water from the back corner towards the front glass and splashing on the front glass. And that adds a lot of oxygen, and it creates a circular flow motion in this tank. I also have an under gravel filter on this side of the tank where my gravel is. It's 2/3 sand. Actually, the back third of the sand side is sitting on foam. There's a few places where you can see the sand level's gotten low enough where the foam is showing. But I was afraid of putting this huge pile of rock work on top of just sand and then having to pull it all out and vacuum underneath it. So I put it all on 3/4 inch foam, and it's worked out pretty well so far. I've also got a school or a shoal of about 16 women tetras in this tank, 17. I don't know, it's kind of hard to keep count of them. I've had a couple breed out and survive in this tank, but not very many. And there's also 6 reed tetras, and they're probably the furthest from the Xingu or Tapajos River biotope, but they're close. And I've really enjoyed this tank. I've not, of course, I've had eggs a couple of times from my L260s, but I bought 2 of them wild caught at a slightly larger size, near adult, and I bought 4 juveniles from a guy in California. And breeding loricard catfish is pretty much a waiting game. They've got to be mature. The situation has to be correct for them. and you pretty much just try to maintain a balance. There's also one hanging out of that cave right there too. That cave has actually had eggs laid in it before, but I don't think they were fertilized. Now, I've got this tank at about 79 degrees, and anybody and everyone will tell you to run these guys at about 80 to 83 or 4. But so far I've kept them at this temperature. I don't want to really amp up their life cycle, which I think that high temperatures do. My plants are not doing very well. I've had a lot of nitrate issues in this tank, and so I've done a lot of RO water changing, and the RO isn't really friendly to the plants. But they're surviving, and my lure cards are getting bigger. It's just not something where they're real ready to breed yet, I guess is the best statement. Okay, and moving over towards the corner, I have a 20-gallon tank, and this is a shrimp tank. And this tank I put 12 Skittles pack of Lucas's shrimp. It was mostly reds, and some of them seemed like fire reds. And this tank has just exploded. It's basically moss all over the inside of it, and a couple of very small growing back out Anubis, and a moss ball, and a bunch of lava rock, and a big piece of coral, and 2 40-gallon sponge filters in the tank. So it's probably highly over filtered, but I like it that way. And this tank had gotten up to about 150 or 200 shrimp, and my water temperature during the day had been getting up to 80 degrees, and I was having to super feed them because they were just in voracious eating mode. I'd put big chunks of rapashi in there and it'd be gone in an hour, and I think I had a colony crash or a cannibalistic event in the tank, and I'm probably down to about 120 shrimp in there now. They are an interesting mix of colors because basically I just let the Skittles pack breed out. I didn't cull or do anything. I get an occasional brown, but not very many, like Lucas Bretz has said. I actually think there's a black rose in there now, and I'm getting a lot of lighter reddish colors, but there are still blue lines going in the tank, and there are still gold lines going in the tank. But mostly it's cherry and some offshoot of cherry. I'm getting some really strong colors out of it, so I've really enjoyed using this crossbreeding example. This is my first shrimp tank. It's the first time I've ever really dealt with shrimp before. And temperature in that tank right now is about 75, 76 maybe, because our temperatures are beginning to cool off a little bit here. It's basically just an old plant fluorescent bulb. It gets most of its light from the light hood on my 110, which is basically a 4-bulb, 4-foot fixture, and a lot of that light goes right down into that tank and creates algae growth on the front surface, which is where the babies and the shrimplets seem to hang out an awful lot. I've had really good luck with these guys. I've been very cautious about my water changes, but so far so good. Okay, I'll move into the dining room and continue. Okay, back again. This is a 29-gallon quarantine tank that we set up to finally actually have a quarantine tank, and my wife moved some moss from her rainbow tank, and lo and behold, we had baby rainbows in the mix. So they are coming along quite nicely. They're at most of them are at the 3/4 to an inch stage, and they are doing just fine. We're going to have a whole tank full of Gorder Rivers, or potentially Gorder River and either bronze or turquoise mix. I'm not sure. The more I look at them, the more I'm convinced that they're all just regular Gorder Rivers, which will be great. These fish came from Jim, and you can look back and see my raid on Sashimi Whiskey's Fish Room video. Jim moved out to Washington to work with Corey, and he had to get rid of a bunch of his fish. And this 29-gallon tank and the rainbows that are the parents of these rainbows came from him. So let's move around to the, you can see this is just basically a bunch of plants, and it has an old hood on it, and I had this old hood and I converted it to LEDs for light, and they're kind of bright, but I think they're weak enough so that it still functions. This tank has a 10-gallon sponge filter in it and an undergravel plate on this end of the tank. I have lots of old undergravel filters because basically I'm an old school fish keeper, and I still have a lot of my old equipment, and undergravel is one of the things that I had. Okay, let's move around here. Ooh, sorry. And we'll get a look at my wife's tank. This is a 75-gallon tank that I got my wife for last Christmas. And it's been set up about 8 or 9 months. And you can see that it is full of plants. My wife is a botanist and a master gardener. And she loves plants. So she's really been working on growing plants. Now this tank has a, it did have 10 jade shrimp from Rob, but I'm afraid the 10 jade shrimp have been either pestered to death or killed by the Gorder River rainbows. It also had a blurry eye in it that came from Jim. These fish, most of them came from Jim. And it had a blurry eye, but it died. And I have been fighting internal parasites in this tank for quite a while. And it is being treated with Icex and Pro at the moment again, because they are still exhibiting these parasites. And you can see there's a turquoise rainbow right there that is not looking so good. We call her a she, and I don't think she's actually going to make it. We lost one of the bronze rainbows. We've lost 10 jade shrimp. We lost several pseudomogills and a few of the threadfin rainbows. And I put a dozen autosynclus in here for my wife because we were having diatomaceous algae issues, and I think we've got 6 or 8 of them left. So that's my wife's 75. It's got a homemade light fixture on it, and if you can see that I made, and it's basically Well, you can look at in the shop light build to get the build on that. But this tank is doing okay, except for the fact that it's still battling internal parasites. And tomorrow's their water change day, so they're looking kind of, there are praecox rainbows in here as well. We lost one of them not too long ago. It had some kind of columnaris looking stuff on it, fungus or something. Probably just an offshoot of the this tank is a 13-gallon rimless that has about 25 of Lucas Brett's rainbow endlers in it. I'm not sure if you can see them. I'm not going to adjust the camera. I got this tank from Jim as well. It is a 13-gallon rimless with the Marineland light that came with my wife's 75-gallon, which was way too dim for that tank, but it's perfect for this tank. And these guys have done okay. I think we've lost one endler, but the shrimp are having a hard time in here. We've lost quite a few shrimp, but they still keep kicking. This tank basically has a canister filter on it and a lily pipe, and that's all the filtration that is on it. The guppy grass has gone wild, the moss has gone wild. All the plants that were put in this tank to begin with have just gone crazy. So right now it is a huge mass. But I think the shrimp like it like that, and I think their young have a better chance of surviving, so we pretty much left it like that. So that's basically a walk around of the tanks that my wife and I have in the house right now. I've got another 10-gallon tank that's ready to set up, and I've also got a 55 that I need to clean, reseal, build a stand for, and set it up. And I'm hoping to use that 55 for whatever I might bring back from Peru next year. We also have several new additions to the family, and pictures of them will follow. Good luck, YouTube.
Show me the power that man cannot harness, to turn towards malice or work into woe. Be it the stars or the moon or the planets or the tide